Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 10th episode of the Exploring Antinatalism podcast, a podcast all about the subject of antinatalism created by antinatalists. My name is Amanda Oldfan-Sukanik, also known as Forever Wolf Films on YouTube, and today I'm joined by the prolific author of such works as The Speciesism of Leaving Nature Alone and the Theoretical Case for Wildlife Antinatalism, Antinatalism and the Future of Suffering, Why Negative Utilitarians Should Not Aim for Extinction, and You Are Them, to name but a few, Magnus, Vinding. And returning to the Exploring Antinatalism podcast, we are joined once again by the creator of Ephilism, Inmendham. So, hello, Magnus. Hello, Inmendham. Welcome, both of you, and thank you so much for being with me today.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks for inviting me.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so for our listeners who may not be aware, Inmendham has already been on the Exploring Antinatalism podcast once before. He gave us a long interview in episode 7, which you can check out anywhere our fine podcast can be shown. If you wish to learn more about Gary, please go check out that episode. However, Gary, is there anything you wanted to say in this episode to introduce yourself?
No.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so Magnus, welcome. This is your first time on the show. To start us off, I was hoping I could just briefly ask you a question or two about who you are and what you do, and give our listeners some context. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, the books you've written, and how you came to write about the subject of antinatalism, or wildlife antinatalism, as you have called it in several of your books?
Sure, right. I guess basically I think of myself as someone who's just trying to do what I find as reasonable, do what I can that is, the most reasonable thing possible, basically. And that's, so I've been exploring the issues of, the deep questions of how we should really act in this world. So ethics, basically. I've been thinking about this and writing about this for about a decade now, and I started off very much as a classical utilitarian, actually, inspired by the work of Sam Harris, actually, his The Moral Landscape, and then gradually I've developed, it moved in more and more of a suffering-focused direction. So at this point I would call myself a negative utilitarian, roughly at least, and beyond that, I would also say that I've moved in a less and less anthropocentric direction over time. So I've written about quite a few pieces about speciesism and why that's not justified. So I'd say that basically, sums up my views at this point in my development.
Okay, excellent. And then, so how did you get interested in the subject of antinatalism?
Right, so antinatalism, it's something that comes up a lot in the context of reducing suffering. Among philosophers who are suffering-focused ethics, I guess someone like David Benatar is, he's arguably the most well-known, at least within academia. Others include Jamie Mayerfeld and also Clark Wolf. They're both suffering-focused thinkers within academia. But so David Benatar is a prominent defender of what can be characterized as a suffering-focused view, although he's not really, himself will also say, he's not really someone who's a consequentialist focused on minimizing suffering. I think that's actually an important point, because oftentimes it can seem like people who are antinatalists will say that they are antinatalists because this is the best way to reduce suffering, basically. And I think that's a claim that's actually very much non-obvious, and I think there are actually some important counter-arguments to that view.
Okay. Out of curiosity, just to sort of segue us into Inmendham, out of curiosity, in You Are Them, you do reference Inmendham several times, and also quite a lot of Great Tide Show videos. So I just was curious how you came across Inmendham's videos.
Well, I just found them on YouTube some years ago, so there's not much of a story there, I'm afraid.
Okay, no, that's all right. All right, so both of your positions have a great deal of things in common, as well as a great deal of things not in common at all. You are both suffering reductionists, or even suffering eliminationists, so to speak, but both roads towards that end that you both argue for are quite divergent. So Magnus, in your book, Antinatalism and the Future of Suffering, Why Negative Utilitarians Should Not Aim for Extinction, you do argue against antinatalism, at least in the sense that it should not lead to extinction. Can you explain the position you take within this work, and if you still hold this to be true, and then feel free, both of you, to jump in.
But yeah, so I should clarify that that was a piece I wrote 5 years ago, and it's not a piece that I agree with anymore. I mean, so I do actually have, I do preface it by saying that it's a consideration that's worth taking into account. What I say in that piece, and what I say there is basically that there's a risk that suffering might emerge elsewhere if humans go extinct, and even that it could also re-emerge here on Earth if, for example, if humans went extinct, or even if all sentient life went extinct. And what I would say about that at this point is, I mean, as far as I remember back then, I said that was, I think I framed it as like a decisive reason not to aim for extinction, basically. I think it's not a decisive reason in my view at this point, but I think there are other reasons that one can emphasize, and perhaps it would be worth going into those later. But yeah, that gets at the gist of it.
Let me just qualify it. Okay, so if I suggested extincting 99% of the animal organisms on Earth, okay, and leaving behind the most intelligent one, some 5 of them or 50 of them or whatever the number is you think needs to exist to watch the universe and make sure the universe doesn't do anything in the future that's stupid, would you say that you agree with that basic idea that, okay, yes, we didn't extinct intelligence, but we we prevented all of the suffering things from playing a stupid game that's pointless to play?
Yeah, so right, I'm not sure what are you asking about, a specific number, because I don't think it's like a binary.
99.99%. We eliminate everything on Earth except for human beings. 10 of them. Okay, 10 human beings remain. They have infinite amount of technology, so to speak. I mean, they have all kinds of nuclear bombs. They have all kinds of weapons. They have death rays. They have whatever our technology can create, so they can monitor the universe. They can monitor the Earth. If they see anything that looks like it's going to pop up and be stupid, they can shoot it.
Yeah, so I mean, it's in that case, I would obviously say that could be, I mean, I'm not quite sure. So you're saying this is a thought experiment where we have this, because
I'm suggesting it as a solution that preserves your worry that there may be some job for human beings to do in the future. Like, we can't die because we need to be here to prevent some future disaster. So I'm just saying, a few of us put on our little janitor suits, we sit here and we just wait for some other disaster to show up, and we'll take care of it because we're still here. You're saying we need to preserve an intelligent guardian. Okay, so I'm just saying that all the non-intelligent animals then are superfluous to that function. We don't need wildebeest to be able to prevent harm in the universe, so wildebeest can go. All the other crap can go, and we'll just leave these little stupid humans to sit here and play Star Wars.
Right, okay, so I guess I would agree that I think it would, other things being equal, it would be good if there were no non-human animals, basically. That is my view. But I should also clarify, with respect to the view that I defended in that piece, that I no longer hold that to be that humans need to be here. I mean, that also comes with, certain risks that might be bad, all things considered. So it's not as though,
right. So you would allow me to take the thought experiment one step further and just say, let's forget about leaving humans behind. Let's just leave robots behind, and robots can take care of it because they can figure out the simple equation and do the job for us, and so we don't even have to be here anymore.
So yeah, if possible, I mean, I would say that would be a good thing. Yeah. Right.
Okay. So we agree. Fine. Good.
Yeah, basically on that point, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think it is also worth, so when we do talk about extinction, I think it's important to clarify that, especially from our current situation. If we're not just dealing in thought experiments, it's important to highlight the many risks that actually face us. Including risks of things unfolding in much worse ways than anything close to what we see today. This is what's been referred to as an S risk, that things could go much, much worse, that we could give rise to astronomical amounts of suffering in the future. And I think those kinds of risks are actually extremely important to to take into consideration for anyone who cares about reducing future suffering, because one could argue that these risks should actually even be our main priority, in part because they just contain so much suffering. So even if the probability is fairly low, it still would have great value and expectation to work on reducing the risks of these outcomes. And I think it's important to note that the kinds of actions we can take that best reduce these particular worst-case risks or risks of worst-case outcomes, they might well be actions that are rather different from the ones that, for example, address the kind of suffering that we see today. That it could well be that we should look into very different actions. And I think it's very much an open question, a question that demands serious research, what we should do in order to reduce these risks. And I think one thing it includes, that at least it something that seems very important to emphasize, is actually to be very, very cooperative and to try to, emphasize that we are, those of us who try to minimize suffering, a peaceful movement, that we are against violence, and that we generally try to, avoid these worst case outcomes via peaceful means.
Yeah, sorry, I just don't buy this argument at all. I mean, Nazi Germany wasn't going to be stopped with peaceful means. You had to sit there and pass rules. I mean, every single crime we have a law against it because peaceful negotiation didn't work. We can't peacefully tell people not to beat their kids. We can't tell people to peacefully not beat their wives. We can't stop rapists. We can't stop a lot of things, and we have to unpeacefully tell them they can't do it. So this whole word violence is just such a... it's such a slander. I mean, what do you think is violence? If I shoot a rapist, did I do the wrong thing?
Well, so I think that's a good point. I mean, obviously, we can mention a lot of cases where people commit violence in self-defense or to defend other innocent beings, and I think virtually everyone agrees that it's true that violence can be justified in those cases. But it's very much to your point, actually, when you say that things related to violence. I mean, it is something that you can easily become a victim of uncharitable attacks, and that is just something that one needs to take into account when trying to create a better world.
Well, I'm just saying I can't play this game with words. I'm just saying violence has a definition. Fine. I'm saying if I am defending myself, you're saying it's not an act of violence. Well, if I'm defending animals caught in a concentration camp and I go in there and, Rambo the place, am I right or am I wrong? You're saying I'm automatically wrong, okay, because I applied violence to rescue something from torture. I'm saying I can't say that. I will say I'm not suggesting anybody do anything unnecessary that won't solve the problem. So don't sit there and do violence that won't fix it, okay? But if you're going to fix it, if you're actually going to stop it forever, then I'm saying, yes, an act of violence is perfectly reasonable. We lost him.
So, sorry?
Your mic was off for a second.
It's okay. You're back.
Yeah, you're good now. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So, it's important to clarify, obviously. So, can it be justified to go into a slaughterhouse in order to save the animals in there? I mean, given the situation in which we find ourselves, it's like it doesn't really matter what kind of ethical view you have. It's just going to be counterproductive, as I'm sure you agree with.
I wouldn't argue that I automatically know it's going to be counterproductive, okay? I think it was very productive for the anti-abortion people to kill abortion doctors. It worked. Not too many doctors want to be abortion doctors. They don't want to put a target on themselves. So it worked in stopping abortions. It made abortions less accessible in America. Fact. So I'm just saying acts of violence do, in fact, work. You want to say they don't work, fine. I'm saying, well, they obviously do. I don't like violence. I'm not for violence. I don't own, violent weapons. I'm not a gun nut. I'm not any of this thing for some sort of war. I'm just saying I can't be intellectually honest and say all violence is bad, because guess what? Not all violence is bad.
Well, but that's I'm sorry, but that's a bit of a straw man. I did not say all violence is bad.
Well, you said anti-violent movement, blah, blah, blah. That's the word you used. It has no definition and no context. I'm just giving the word context and just making sure when somebody says I'm violent, under what context am I violent? Because I will not say violence doesn't work. I'm just saying it's situational. And I'm not going to judge all acts as being foolish or stupid or unreasonable because one act is. No, all acts aren't.
So I should clarify, I haven't said that you are violent. I hope.
Well, lots of other people have in this context. So I'm just going to sit there and I'm just going to make the assertion that there's a lot of people who are claiming I'm a violent antinatalist or I'm an activist antinatalist or I'm all these things. I'm just saying that as soon as somebody brings the accusation that no one is allowed to have an aggressive plan, I'm not going to agree with that because maybe some aggressive plans are perfectly satisfactorily reasonable. Now you want to get yourself killed to go rescue some animals. How am I going to say don't do it? No, I'm not going to say don't do it because I have no way of saying it's the wrong thing to do because there is a fact that the animals are being tortured. It is a fact that you may prevent some measure of that torture. So why would I lie and say I automatically know it's wrong?
Well, I mean, of course, saying automatically no is a strong claim, right? But we can still talk in terms of probabilities here. And I think it's important to keep in mind that with respect to the future, that there are risks that our actions, they can not only pull people closer towards us in terms of values, but we can also very much push people away from our values, such as a concern for suffering. And I think that's a risk very much worth taking seriously. And I think it is something I
would agree that there's a risk, but I would also say that it's very 50-50. I could argue about how the French Revolution took place and how the American Revolution took place, and that these weren't majoritarian revolutions, and that it was a minority who stood up, and risked everything and put it all on the line, and they won. And the fact is that we might still be living under stupid kings if it wasn't for those revolutions. So I'm just saying I can't make some blanket statement that it is inappropriate for rebellion. Rebellion is a rational response to certain circumstances, and there's a point where maybe it's the only response that will work.
Right, but so now we're talking about rebellion. I mean, in the case of this specific movement, of trying to reduce future suffering, I think there are good reasons to avoid these kinds of basically violence and to try even to make an effort to distance oneself.
Well, exactly, but I'm just saying, where have I? I'm just saying that this is being used by other people to drive wedges, and I'm just saying that what's the wedge then? Be specific in what you're saying. Don't tell me that you're against violence. Explain to me what violence is okay and what violence isn't. I mean, will you stop a rapist? Will you perpetrate an act of violence to stop that crime?
I mean, yes, I think, but again, this is also something that is very uncontroversial, right? So most people would agree with that. But
we're not talking about most people. We're just talking about a value equation. We know that most people value a certain thing. Well, we, as intellectuals, have decided to value something different. So we know the crime is just as bad. So let's accept that the crime is just as bad. Okay, the fact that most people don't see it that way is irrelevant. You know it, and I know it. Okay, that the crime is just as bad. So we're just talking about the use of violence to stop something we can pragmatically agree is an equal crime.
Sorry, so the equal crime in this case is...
Well, let's just make one up. A rape of a woman, a brutal beating and rape of a woman. And right now there's a pig in a cage, never seen sunlight, never seen daylight, has been artificially inseminated to have many more piglets than it could possibly even feed. And that's all the life it will ever know, and then it'll be slaughtered. Which one do you think is a more elaborate sentient crime?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in that case, I would say, other things being equal, violence is justified in order to save this being from a horrible fate, no doubt.
Okay, so that's all the qualification I want. All right, I'm just saying that this isn't as simple as just saying, we need to be anti-violent. Well, yes, we need to as a pragmatic thing. This might be in our best interest to negotiate first. Of course. Yes, let's first negotiate with Hitler. Yes. But I'm just saying I'm not going to rule out that if Hitler is incapable of being reasonable, that sooner or later we should show up and D-Day him.
So yeah, that's the point, that in the context of being pragmatic and in the context of having to act in this real world, I think merely just making that latter claim in this context of trying to reduce suffering is very risky to say, and it can drive people away from our cause.
Well, I'm just saying they have to be unreasonable to be driven. That would be my argument, because they obviously don't really care. They really don't understand that the animal is being tortured. They're just pretending, like everybody else, like regular people are just pretending it's not happening. It's not a real crime. It's not something to get upset about. I'm just saying, if I did the rape right in front of you, you would see it. You'd be clear to you, this is a problem. This shouldn't be accepted. Yet you're saying we all should accept the other problem. You're saying everybody should just de-emotionalize and deconstruct into some other kind of being except for a rational one. So you'll go to war for your causes, you won't go to war for their causes, is all you're saying. If it's my cause, it's worth it. If it's your cause, it's not worth it. And if you think that's being rationally consistent or good for the cause, I'm saying those kinds of lies, okay, in my opinion, are bad for the cause. That's unreasonable conversation.
I mean, so obviously my case is purely a pragmatic one in this case. So I'm saying that violence doesn't work. And what you said was that...
It's not the subject. It's not the subject. Okay, why are you even bringing it up? There has been no case of anybody acting violently antinatally, right? So why are we even talking about the violence of some sort of strategy? Why is that even brought up as a subject? Why do we all have to say, oh yes, I'm for antinatalism, but yes, I'm all for non-violent antinatalism? Why do I even have to have that conversation?
I mean, so I so strongly agree with you, but the reason why is that this is what most people think about as the first thing when they hear about negative utilitarianism, for example. The idea that we should minimize suffering is just the first thing that springs to mind, and that's why it's so important. I mean, I should clarify that the point I'm making here is not directed at you. It's as a movement in general, it's really just important that we distance ourselves strongly from violence. This is not a personal point, I should clarify. It's simply because most people are unfortunately rather unreasonable. Most people are heavily biased against views like negative utilitarianism, and so they will portray it in the least charitable way possible, and they will associate it with violence intuitively, and also try to imply that it must that it necessarily
I haven't seen that, frankly. I've never even seen Benetard have to face a single question about violence. So well, I don't necessarily believe that this argument is a real argument. It seems to me exactly all it's intended to do is create wedges on rhetoric, and we all have to speak the right kind of rhetoric or something. And I'm saying, I reject that. I'm going to change my reasoning skills. I'm going to pretend to be an idiot to say things that are comforting. Well, forget it. That's not the argument. If you either understand the argument or you don't. Like I said, if anyone who understands what suffering is and how horrible it is will understand that, yes, you do whatever you have to in certain circumstances to prevent the harm. So that's easy. So you're saying that somehow these people have been persuaded to be antinatalists, yet they have no empathy, they have no motivation to stop a crime because they know it's horrible. They somehow, all of that, they're clueless to.
I haven't said any such thing. So my point is rather, so the point is that antinatalists could be the most peaceful people in the world, like everyone. There could be no bad apples whatsoever. And yet people from the outside are still going to view the antinatalist movement and people in general.
Well, it says you. That's all I'll say to that. Okay, you want to argue with what I think is a phantom that doesn't really exist. If you haven't convinced them that the suffering is bad, they aren't motivated. They don't know that the rape is bad. Like there's some guy and he's saying, hey, chicks like it. You get a little aggressive. It's okay. It's fun. What's a little bit of a beat? I've been beat up 7 million times. No big deal. Okay. Now that person isn't going to become a very good antinatalist, right? Even if they say I'm against rape, they obviously have no empathy. They would never say they're against rape, would they? No, they wouldn't, because that's their attitude. I'm just saying if somebody doesn't already understand the argument, okay, this subject about how we stop the torture, right? And this isn't like this is about some sort of benign torture, like the torture just popped out of nowhere. We know the torture is imposed, okay, by our policies, by our behavior. Okay, it doesn't just pop out of nowhere. It pops right in front of us by mechanisms we are in complete control of. So let's not pretend we can't control it. Yes, we are under control. We're causing the torture, and we should understand we need to stop us.
Yeah, but unfortunately, most people are extremely resistant to generally just even arguments for a position like negative utilitarianism. And this is not something that I'm making up. I mean, this is something I've very much witnessed.
I understand. I'm just saying, what's the procedure of convincing them otherwise? My argument is the first step, the primary step, is them acquiring a real sense of empathy. So that is the first step. They have to see the other thing as themselves, as your title of your book says, they are me. Okay, they have to recognize that the torture might as well be happening to me. It is myself that is being attacked when that victim is being attacked. That they have to understand. If they don't understand that, any other words that follow, like I'm an antinatalist, mean nothing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, my view is that it's extremely unlikely that most people are ever going to come to.
Why? Why is it unlikely? Why? It's like the most ABC, easy to understand fact on this planet if you understand evolution. So it's like saying we'll never defeat religion, or people will always be cement-headed. This is something, I in reading your book, I just didn't like about it, because it implied we have a whole bunch of instincts. We don't have any. Okay, as organisms on planet Earth, we are the most uninstinctive organism there is. If you throw us into the wild, we are helpless. Okay, we don't even know instinctively how to have sex. We have to usually watch somebody else do it first. The whole thing's a mystery to us. We don't have one single natural impulse. Every single bit of our psychology is controlled by environment, by the culture. There's no desire to have kids. That's a fallacy. We know that all I have to do is raise a kid a little bit differently. With he likes video games, he likes this, he likes that. And if I don't teach him some sort of obligation, he has no clue he has any obligation to make kids. I mean, there's nothing in us that's instinctive. Zero.
I mean, so that claim about intuitions and instincts is something I disagree with very strongly, and I think, modern psychology tells a different story, I would argue, but I think I'm wondering whether this is a digression relative to what we are most interested in discussing.
I don't know. You think it's a digression? It's fundamental, essentially, to this argument of what persuasion is going to look like. You're saying I have to persuade people because they have a whole bunch of built-in instinctive mechanisms that are saying I can't believe that. I'm saying that's just rubbish. Human beings are selfish. Human beings are selfish, right? I mean, my feelings happen. I'm the one feeling. My feelings I actually experience. I can't feel their pain. As a fact, I can't do it. I can synthesize some sense of it, but I can't feel other people's pain. And the simple fact is that if I could feel their pain, right, if I was a slave owner and I could feel the sore scars on the back of the slave being whipped, right, then all of a sudden that slave's not going to get whipped anymore, is he? Right? If I was a true empath or something and I could actually feel their pain, I wouldn't be perpetrating the act. So the only thing that prevents people from understanding is their selfishness, period. There is no other agenda that they can't get by. And even the whole argument of procreation, there's no animal on this earth today that has sex for the purpose of procreation. They just desire, okay, and that's it. They desire to polish penises, and it doesn't go any further than that. And all the rest of it is just bullshit, okay? We don't do it for that purpose. Animals don't do it for that purpose. Evolution tricked us with a very simple mechanism. We didn't have to have an ideology to perform the act. We didn't have to want children. I mean, it's just a fact. So why say we can't get past something that isn't a fact? We have no native desire to have kids.
Yeah, concerning what you said about that it's only because we are very selfish that we're not focused on reducing suffering. Actually, there are many counterexamples to that. So in this, so there are a lot of people who actually are very altruistic in one sense, in that they spend a lot of time and resources trying to, increase future populations and increase the probability that there will be a large future population. And these people are
name one who's not a racist.
Well, I mean, these aren't racist. I mean, these are, you can find scholars at the so-called Future of Humanity Institute.
I'm not terribly interested in scholars, frankly. That's another thing in your book I found kind of obnoxious and annoying, is this reverence for individuals of any kind. You got to take everybody on their word, not on their reputation. And this, even the whole physics thing, we could get into this whole field crap and all this other crap. You're almost quantuming the universe with a bunch of woo that I think is superfluous to the function here altogether. We are individual humans. That's a fact. And we're not in any way connected. There's no part of the universe that's jumping between my brain and your brain and give me special knowledge of your existence or special knowledge of what's happening to you or any of that crap. We're individuals.
That should be very clear for anyone who's read my book, basically that I agree with that view.
I know, but that's not the way you said it. So you kept, there's the word field has to be in your book about 778 million times. And it's no way to describe what human beings are. Human beings are not a field. They're not connected to each other. And that's one of the big problems, is they're not connected to each other. They don't have information about what's happening to each other. They have no frickin' idea.
So that latter point, I agree with you.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, it's just verbiage, I know. So, but that's the trick here, is articulating a point in the way that it's both accurate and pleasant to hear. So I'll concede I'm not a great poet, and my objection is that some of the terminology being used by people just doesn't cut it. It doesn't cover the substance of the core of the subject, which is, first off, evolution. Evolution is a terrible, awful mechanism. It's basically intentionally serial killing all of these things. It's saying, I'm going to try to improve something by creating so many of them, and I'm going to declare 99% of them defective. That's what evolution's doing. Right now there's seal populations where only 3 seals are passing on their genetics, right, of the whole herd of seals, and all the rest of them are just fodder. They're just to be used to create that one hero. So it's like having an Olympics where, you killed 9,000 competitors just to have one guy stand up and say, I won. It's a terrible system, and that's what we're fighting.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to say about it. I think it might be good to take a step back, and because perhaps I should share what my impression is of your view. So I think that you're saying that basically most people, it's likely that most people actually will come around to agree with your view. Is that correct?
It's my view that the only thing stopping it is high school education. It's my view that, yes, religion, silly fable, believing in fables for Christmas' sake, is what they're living for, is stupid fables, this nonsense. Yes, believing in evolution will destroy all enthusiasm. Yes, if you really understand what evolution is doing right now and what it's done for billions of years, you will understand we're in big trouble. This is a really bad serial killer we're playing with. We're playing little tic-tac-toe games with a maniacal, insidious torturer. This is Mangala all over the place, and we're giving him a Christmas party. The God-botherers are basically celebrating a system that is a mass torturer and murderer.
So is your view that if everyone on Earth had a high school education, it would be more likely than not that humanity would decide to go extinct?
It would have already. Every civilized nation is in domestic negative population growth. Every single one of them is in declining native population. And the only thing increasing their population is importation of the morons from the third world. And so, yes, I believe that you give people a high school education and they will go below that 2.2 replacement population number, and that's extinction. If that continues, it's extinction. Yes, Japan is going extinct right before our eyes.
So, right, in that case, if you think that's I mean, we should assign, I guess, a certain probability to that kind of scenario, right? And in that scenario, it wouldn't be, I mean, the difference that our actions would make if that's the way, the direction.
All right, well, go ahead. Go ahead. Assign a probability. How exactly are you going to assign a probability? You know all of the possibilities, and you know how to rank them.
I'm not saying anything specific about the probability, but you know. We can talk about having
I'm just saying we're already doing it. We're already there, and you're saying what's the probability of populations deciding voluntarily once they have a high school education to go into negative population growth? What's the probability? We're already doing it. Why do I have to argue about its probability when it's already taking place?
So, I mean, but I'm just talking about. I mean, first of all, I mean, it's not really true. I mean, if we look at Japan, their population has increased over the last 15 years, and the same with China over the last 20 years.
Okay, I no, there's no point in having a conversation if we're just going to bullshit each other. Okay, it's not. It's not a truth. It's not the truth. I'm sorry. It's not the truth. Their replacement population, their birth rate is below replacement. The fact is the people aren't dying, okay? They're living longer. Okay, living longer doesn't mean you've increased population.
The fertility rate, that's what I'm talking about. That has increased in Japan over the last 15 years and in China over the last...
It's still below replacement population.
That is true. That is true. But still, I mean, so the point is just there are different future scenarios we can outline, right? And different futures...
Right, and the only reason why people are doing that, I think, is to make a futile argument. They're trying to pretend it's futile, when it's clearly not futile. We're already there, and these people don't even believe in the cause. They're already becoming vegetarian for health reasons, and I could make the argument in vegetarianism we're already gaining ground just from the health reasons. We don't even have to make the empathetic argument, and we're already winning. So I'm saying that why would I think it's improbable that for example, human beings would stop eating meat when the trend seems to be in place where the more education people have, the more sophisticated they are as human beings, the less likely they are to be carnivores.
So obviously, I should just clarify what my point is. Obviously, I'm not saying that it's futile to try to make a difference in the world. I mean, my view is very much the opposite. But the point here is just about our own actions and what kind of, basically what value we have. Because I'm interested in how can we take the best actions that minimize the most suffering in expectation. And the thing is that relative to future scenarios where humanity just does go extinct, or just decides that on its own. I mean, that's the counterfactual impact of our actions, which I gather would just be to expedite that process, right? That wouldn't actually be much of a difference compared to a scenario where, and we can say this is highly unlikely, but I would argue not negligibly so. Just that the future could be far, far worse. I mean, we could see population increases. Like, for example, this could happen by, just like China instituted this one-child policy, we can imagine an authoritarian state that institutes policies where you have to have more children and strongly incentivizes that. In fact, there are historical examples of that, and I believe...
Yeah, the historical examples based on religious states. So again, no, all we have to do, if we got rid of religious states right now, this conversation wouldn't even need to be taking place, because it would be so obvious that people are having babies seriously, and they're not doing it for silly cultural reasons. They're doing it for individual personal gain reasons, and when they do that mathematics, they figure out it's not in my best interest to have 8 to 10 kids. And most women would choose not to have those children. So there's a ton of women in the third world right now who have no choices, and them having choices is the biggest thing we can do, is give them the freedom to make a personal choice about what they want to do with their existence. And that's clearly the number one cause of current population growth. So I'm just saying, again, I'm all for making this argument, and this idea that somehow there's an obstacle is what I'm arguing against. There is absolutely no obstacle to our future being where human beings are just too sophisticated to play stupid games. They don't play stupid games anymore. Your theory of what the first future could be entirely depends on idiocracy completely winning. All the intellectuals dropping dead and a bunch of morons taking control.
But you also have to concede that it's a risk, right? And that's something to take seriously and do our best to
Yeah, I know, but it's the
risk,
same
right?
fight. They're doing your best to minimize it means stopping the third world. It means telling religious people to shove it. That's the number one thing antinatalists can do, is go to war with religion.
Right. So, but religion still isn't the only risk of future suffering. I mean, that would be
I think it is the only risk, okay? There's no rational way that somebody becomes delusional about the function of human beings. We all see it. We all watch our parents degrade and die. We all watch maybe our brother and sister drop dead for some stupid reason or get killed in some horrible way or be paralyzed. We see people born with ALS. All of these realities face every single individual. And I'm arguing the fact is, if they're not driven by some moronic culture to keep stepping into that mud, that they will choose not to step into the mud.
Right. But I mean, I would still just argue that there are other risks, and it's important to not neglect those and to take those other risks very seriously. I mean, so one risk, for example, that some people have explored and taken very seriously are risks of technological scenarios that go very badly, where, for example, you have things spiraling out of control because of technology, and that could give rise to, for example, population explosion in other kinds of sentient beings. And this is a risk. Again, it's not necessarily the most likely outcome, but again, that's not the point. I mean, to claim that a scenario is the scenarios that are most worth preventing are not necessarily the most likely, but they are those scenarios that contain the greatest amount of suffering. And I think if one's primary concern is to minimize future suffering,
well, I don't see how any of those concerns would ever implicate the natural environment in some significant way. So I don't see how. Well, the vast amount of suffering is not happening to human beings. Human beings are tiny percentage of the mammalian life, and they're a tiny percentage of the sentient life on this planet. So frankly, the fact that humans go a little loopy or do something double stupid or triple stupid would be a rather insignificant uptick in the amount of suffering on planet Earth.
Yeah, but exactly, on planet Earth. So these worst case outcomes, they wouldn't just be contained on Earth. I mean, these things could potentially explode to outer space. And the point is, and this is very much not an intuitive point.
Sorry. Yeah, okay, I'm supposed to see that that's somehow different than religious philosophy. This whole belief in space travel or space colonization makes absolutely zero sense. I mean, the amount of money, the amount of resources, the money, technology you would have to apply to create any kind of population anywhere in space is an insane expense. That we are not in a natural environment where you could have a kid for free and feed him for free. There's no free lunch out in space. So, human existence is going to be preposterously expensive in space.
So that is true, but again, the argument here isn't necessarily that it's human life that's going to suffer. So these worst case outcomes, it could involve very strange kinds of suffering that don't exist on Earth presently.
Well, I know. So why don't I just invent every possible fantasy and then worry about it? I'm sorry, that's just a fantasy. In my opinion, has the the amount of probability that exists there is so small that it can't possibly be a focus.
So, but that's the point, and that's very much where I disagree. So I agree, basically, that it is by no means the most likely scenario. But if we again take an expected value framework, it is true that the disvalue in such a scenario would be so great that it actually does merit concern, because the population increase, it could be millions of times bigger than anything that could be contained on it.
I mean, this is like not seeing the forest through the blueberry bush or something. I mean, you're getting distracted by something that has absolutely nothing to do with the reality of the scope of a real risk. I'm sorry, there's no real risk that sentient life, is going to somehow infest space. It just isn't a likelihood.
I'm afraid there is a real risk. I mean,
how is the real risk? Explain it to me. I mean, how rich people decide, or whatever the mechanism is, to decide to, in some way, enslave billions of people on Earth, because they all have to work every day for 12 hours a day to be able to finance this project in the first place, even get it almost off the ground. And again, there is no exponential growth in these atmospheres. None of these atmospheres support life. There is no free lunch. There's only the very expensive lunch. You have to build a new environment for every single human. Has a new environment has to be built for him, a whole new planet for him to live on, essentially. It doesn't matter whether it's, well, what's sentient life? Dog, cat, I don't care. It has to be sentient. If it's not sentient life, it's not a risk.
Well, yeah, I totally agree. But again, I mean, so we can imagine forms of sentience that could be, and again, I'm not saying this is the most likely outcome, but there is a risk that sentient life could be maintained.
Well, all right, let me say that if I had 5 hours to go through all of the physics, okay, and explain to you how there is no probability of other sentient life, that our own evolution has enough documentation of how unlikely this chemistry is. It is preposterously unlikely chemistry. It's not going to happen again. It's not going to happen again.
No, so yeah, as I just stated, I'm not talking about life emerging anew. I mean, I'm talking about new forms of sentience that could be created by humans.
I know. How do you create a sentience? I mean, it's not a reasonable. I'm just saying. I need 5 hours to explain it to you. But just going through the biological evolution, there is no room for humans to sit here and play some experiment where they can build a sentience. A sentience isn't a computer. The obligation isn't to add 2 plus 2. The obligation is to feel something. You're not going to create the whole big theater that our 100 billion neurons are creating. You're not going to create an artificial one. You're not going to create feelings on an iPhone. It's never going to happen.
So I'm not talking about iPhones here, but there is actually, so as a case in point, scientists have recently been able to revive the brains of pigs in little chambers. So, and that's just, I mean, that's one horror example of how we could actually create disembodied sentience. And who knows
how does that disembody sentience? How does that do that? How is just, you could cut off my head. The fact that we could cut off my head technically, right? A guy almost did a chainsaw, cut his head off. And they kept the guy alive, okay? Because they were able to stop it and then they get the blood circulating again, blah, 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 blah. If I was a head in a jar, I'm not a new form of sentience. I'm just a guy without a body.
Right, so this is, again, so it comes down to the ethics of risk. I'm not talking about this being the most likely outcome, that there necessarily is sentience in these pig brains, but it's nonetheless a risk worth taking seriously. And yeah, other things being equal, we should obviously not do it. We should not revive pig brains in jars like that.
Yeah, well, I think Mengelé's experiments is one part of what you could call was the Holocaust, but I would argue it's a really tiny part. Okay, so you want to worry about a scenario where Mengele starts playing with decapitated pigs, fine. I'm saying it's such a tiny, tiny, tiny problem compared to what nature's doing every single day, every single hour, every single microsecond.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that. But again, so the point about these brains was simply to give a sense of that there is a real risk that disembodied sentience is possible.
Well, I don't think it makes any difference whether it's disembodied or not. I don't care whether I'm disembodied, frankly. I would probably prefer it, frankly. If you can put me on a skateboard and just my head floating around on a skateboard, I'd probably go for it.
Right. So the point there was simply that in a scenario with space expansion, and again, I'm not claiming that this is the most likely scenario, but in such a scenario where we have space expansion, one could, if disembodied sentience is a possibility, that could increase, mean that there could be a much greater potential.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I can disengage the whole subject by just imagining the universe is preposterously huge. So let me just imagine that there's aliens on some planet that are doing all these things you're suggesting we will someday do. Well, they're already doing it, and the space is going to be... I'm just saying I can make that up just as easy and just say, okay, now I have reason to say somehow humans can't go extinct, but somehow they have to fight the aliens who are disemboweling pigs.
I mean,
the whole thing is just premised on some unrealistic view of what the universe is doing. The universe is making little rocks that bang into each other. That's what the universe is doing. It's not making sentience. It's not making thinking. It's not making intelligence. It's not making any of that crap. We only happened on this earth because we got into a 2 billion year long evolution struggle, and that's why we have intelligence. Is because it was a weapon. It's a tool for killing other animals and stealing their goodies. That's why we have it. That's the only reason we have it. It has no other purpose in the universe but to help some little organism do his little selfish thing of murder his brother. Period.
Yeah, I'm not, again, talking about sentience emerging elsewhere in this context.
I didn't say. I said I could make it up. I could say that was the boogeyman. I don't care about your projections about what humans will do.
One at a time.
Just finish my point. So, if we're talking about what's happening on Earth today, right? So humans are, at the moment, we are exponentially increasing the number of beings who are living on factory farms. And, yeah, hopefully...
Bullshit.
Sorry?
It's not exponential. Exponential over what kind of period of time? Exponential over what, 50-year periods?
Well, yeah, roughly that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's understand that yes, we're a long way from 50 years ago. Okay, guess what? America's changed. People aren't smoking cigarettes, long cigarettes, and get them stuck in elevators. I mean, the world has changed in 50 years. I've watched it change in 50 years.
I very much, I mean, there's no doubt that a lot of things have improved, and that it's very likely that improvements will continue. But again, we are talking about the worst case outcomes here, and the importance of reducing the risk of those. And what I'm saying is that we can imagine scenarios, and this is not even fanciful, right? I mean, we can imagine scenarios where humans just continue increasing the number of beings that we impose horrific suffering. I mean, it's conceivable that we could take this horror show even into space, because if we just have so little concern for something. And I think, frankly, recent political trends don't bode all that well. I mean, I don't think we have great grounds for optimism.
I don't think there's any point in looking at political trends, because the political trends are based on politics that doesn't work. The two-party systems doesn't work in any country anymore, right? Because the rich man, poor man argument can't be made anymore, because now the like I said, the liberals have gone crazy and decided to do everything they can to ruin countries. So yes, you can't vote for them because they're going to ruin the country. So, yeah, that's the real politics. But if these subjects were individually taken, people are becoming more empathetic. People are more concerned. People are concerned. They do want a better system. They do want things to work better. All right. And the fact is they're not giving a rational choice to fix it. All right. They're giving two lousy choices and said pick the worst one. All right. It's evil or double evil.
Yeah, but the increasing amount of resources has also meant that even if our willingness to reduce suffering has also increased, then the fact that there are sadly still a majority who do want, for example, meat from factory farms does mean that we have still just increased the number of beings who are suffering on factory farms exponentially. And yeah, so it's even if we see improvements in terms of our willingness to reduce suffering, that doesn't imply that that's necessarily sufficient in order to avoid very, very bad future outcomes. I mean, bad even relative to...
I'm just saying there's no point in taking away the little progress we have and pretending it doesn't exist. So you want to pretend that progress doesn't exist and we're going to go backwards instead of forwards. Okay, go ahead and believe that. Go ahead and worry about stepping backwards, okay? I'm not interested in worrying about falling down the staircase. I'm worried about stepping up more stairs. So I'm going forward with an argument that can win, and I'm not going to sit here and burden myself with a suit of armor and shields and defensive weapons that are so heavy that I'm going to fall down the stairs. No, forget all that crap. I say march forward, not backward.
Yeah, march forward. I mean, I'm not quite sure what you mean there. I mean, so...
Well, you're just bringing up all these antiquity, these boogeymans of antiquity. You're sitting here bashing me over the head with history, like somehow history is a lesson when it isn't. Okay, there's no unsustainable curves in real history. So yes, people can do stupid things, but it always has to end. We're going to run out of oil. That'll be a fact. Okay, it's just going to happen. Lots of things are going to happen, and unsustainable curves will have to end. And I'm arguing that we're already seeing the progress in the sense that we know that population has reduced, and the only place it hasn't reduced is where real ignorance is the enemy. People are having babies when they're 13 years old. We know what the enemy looks like. We know where it is. So there's no point in pretending the human race is the problem. No, it's not the human race. It's one ideology that's the problem. And if you fix that ideology, you have, in fact, fixed the problem. You're 90% up the staircase, I would argue. You're 90% up the staircase when you educate a human being, because then he has appreciation that having kids is a huge responsibility. It's not just a free lunch. Not everything doesn't go over. They know the fairy tales aren't true. They know God isn't going to clean it up. They know that this whole story of, Prince Charming and Snow White go off to the castle and live happily ever after. They know that doesn't happen. You actually get cancer and you die. Okay? You don't do any of this happily ever after crap. So I'm just saying that that's the enemy. The fables are the enemy. The fake stories about reality are the enemies. And most people are empathetic. They just aren't being given any tools to apply their empathy. Most people would vote for a rational right to die. It's a fact. Politics won't allow it to happen.
Right, but even if most people are empathetic, it's also true that most people are extremely optimistic. Like, for example, many of those who are eager about going out to space are secular people rather than religious people. And these are people who very much do want to...
I guess I should have qualified the word religion by including modern physics. Okay, yes, modern physics is another religion. It's full of wooey, made-up bullshit that's just there to destroy the idea that we're determined. We have to find a place to make free will out of random crap. I mean, it's woo physics. So yes, there are intellectuals who are just doing the modern religion thing, right? They're crystal chasers. All right, they're not chasing Jesus or Mohammed. They're chasing the magic crystal.
Right, but most people, or not necessarily most people, but many people are still very optimistic and secular. So it's not the case that it's just you can, for example, get rid of religion and then you will have a population who are...
I'm just saying that the majority of the population will be within the boundaries of rational, in my opinion, so you have some hope, okay? I'm saying, yes, intellectuals can go bad, but intellectuals are usually more reliable than the dumbasses, so I'm saying intelligence usually helps you navigate reality better. So, yes, the fact that some intellectuals get lost and go chasing unicorns is a liability, but it's not a decisive liability, in my opinion. It's not the one that's going to decide the end game.
But I would still argue that it's important to reduce the risks of bad outcomes that could, for example... All Right. So let me try to explain where I'm coming from with my perspective. So my perspective is that, well, here we are, and we can foresee different possible future outcomes, and some of these future outcomes are a lot better than others. And what I would argue is simply that the very worst futures, whatever we imagine those might be, but that these merit a lot of concern, and these very worst futures that could risk emerging, we need to address those.
The worst future would be the annihilation of human beings and letting tyrannosauruses, having leaving behind some tyrannosaurus DNA that allows them to take control the Earth again. That's the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario has nothing to do with human beings doing something. Nature is already fully equipped to do all the torturing that's possible to do. They find a way to have every little surface on this planet is covered with something killing something else. Nature knows how to be a sadistic, torturing murderer better than any of us could possibly. We can't do better than nature. Nature has got the patent. They're professionals at it.
But yeah, I'm afraid we could do worse in that we could, again, spread life elsewhere. And
again, you can keep saying it. You can keep saying it. It's a delusion. I'm sorry. I can't even. I can't. It's just like saying now I got to think about. Oh, God could really exist. No, it's not really physically possible. It's really not physically possible to infest another planet with life. It's not physically possible.
Okay, let me stop you guys there. Sorry. Okay, so we're at a little over an hour. Do we want to go on? Do we want to maybe move on to the second question, or do we want to?
Oh, there's more questions.
Have you guys had enough?
I'm here. I'm in the game. Pick a subject.
So right,
what about?
Maybe it's worth clarifying just very briefly that the argument I'm making isn't really an argument about humans staying around or any to give us reason to pause about making an effort to prevent suffering. I mean, on the contrary, it's true in one sense that I would say that we should pause, and we have good reason to pause. And what I think we should pause and do is that we should reflect deeply about different future outcomes and what kinds of actions we can take to reduce the risk of the worst future outcomes. Again, because for example, it can be tempting to think that one kind of action will be the optimal action in all future scenarios. Like, for example, that we should push for antinatalism. Although, I mean, by the argument that humans actually reduce suffering, say that human antinatalism might be a bad thing because it could, in turn, increase the number of animals in the world. But I mean, not that we need to go there with this, but just when it comes to the future actions that best address worst case risks, I mean, I think we should be skeptical about great confidence in the claim that, for example, we should just urge humans not to.
All right. Well, let's say we narrow the problem to something like feral cats. All right, and say you want to prevent the existence of feral cats. Now, there's certain policies that could do that, right? You put a policy in that people can't own a cat without a license. You go to jail if you have one without a license. You go to jail if you breed them without a license. You could have real policies that prevent the escapees. Okay, now what do you do with the feral cats that already exist? Now, my argument would be extinction solves the problem. Okay, so you round up the ones that exist, put them humanely to sleep, and now you've eliminated the problem. It's gone. I'm saying that's the method you think. Why would I think about these kind of scenarios where somebody could hide cats in their cellar and they could be breeding cats and then have an explosive population of cats? Or I don't know, why should I worry about all of that kind of crap when I know what steps will solve the problem? I know that it's just like if I want to stop a little kid from having a baby when it's 13 years old, there's certain things that will make it less likely that that'll happen. Why don't I just do those certain things, and why should I worry that somehow doing the right thing will be the wrong thing? You're almost arguing as if we have to sit there and pause and be concerned that somehow if we extinct the human race, that somehow the universe is going to be terribly impacted by this event.
Well, that's a complete straw man, so I haven't said any such thing. I should clarify.
Well, then what's the concern? What's the concern? If the end game is extinction, why should I worry about nanotechnology or humans in space or all this other stuff? Of course I'd be against humans in space. So if we're moving in the direction of antinatalism, I don't see a whole bunch of people saying, yes, let's shoot humans into space.
Right, but this relates to a bias that's called the illusion of control, that basically we systematically overestimate the degree of control that we have over things. And I think this can be a similar case. I think just because you oppose space colonization, that means that we can necessarily, as reasonable people, prevent that from happening. I'm saying even if it's most likely that we won't colonize space, there's still a serious risk that space colonization is going to happen.
All right, well, give me an example then. Give me a for example of where we've totally underappreciated some kind of risk. I mean, everybody was worried about nuclear bombs. We fortunately have been able to control them. It's not, I would argue, MAD, mutual assured destruction, isn't a very good control mechanism, but it has worked so far. So what would you bring up? What would you bring up as an example of this thing that we thought we were in control of, but we weren't?
No, actually, nuclear bombs are a good example because people did think that it would be impossible to make nuclear. And that's an example that's often raised.
Well, who thought so? I mean, again, before they understood what physics was, of course, cavemen didn't say stick me blow up 4 million megatons of matter with stick. I take atoms out of stick and blow up everything. Of course, they didn't know.
But so conversely, would you say that we are taking fully into account all relevant future risks?
I didn't say that. No, we're not. I just said the method we're using to control them isn't the best, but it's working, and that's a fact. It has worked. So I'm just saying that, you can say that, okay, so, yeah, some nuclear plants have melted down, so we overestimated our control. What would I argue is that the only control we didn't exercise was the control over capitalism, that it was always capitalism that made nuclear plants fail, not the technology itself. It's the way we implemented it. So it was a very subtle miscalculation that got us into trouble, putting it in the hands of people who have a greedy interest to cut corners. That was the problem.
But wouldn't you say that there's also a risk that, for example, capitalism could spiral out of control and things could get much, much worse than today?
And by what probability are these huge spiraling, unanticipated consequences? You're saying there's a whole bunch of unanticipatable complex scenarios in which this effort goes all bad. What I'm saying we've learned from history, or learned from repeating this process of having to defeat enemies anyway, is that you learn certain strategies work. People write books about how to win a war. I mean, there are strategies that are reliable and effective. I would argue, in every case, people should use caution and be as deliberate as possible. But there's no point in somebody sitting here calculating all the possible ways that something that 99% of the time works will fail. That is a waste of time, in my opinion.
Right. So, so I don't know, Amanda, whether you... I mean, because I have some things to say here, but I don't know whether you prefer to move on.
I don't know. I can pose the second question to you guys and see what you want to do with it. I mean, we're nearing an hour and a half. Magnus, do you want to go on? Or are you tired? Do you want to stop?
We can go on. Yeah.
Okay. I'll pose the second question. I mean, you guys got into some of this already, but it's worth going over it again, I think. I think insofar as nature, it's safe to say that both of you would agree that there is a responsibility to intervene. Magnus, in You Are Them, you talk about the wrongfulness of inaction. So in how humans should intervene is where I think there are probably a lot of disagreements between the two of you. The speciesism of leaving nature alone and the theoretical case for wildlife antinatalism is somewhat similar to an ethilistic argument that you feel it is necessary to intervene in wildlife suffering, though I'm not sure exactly if you're in favor of wildlife extinction. And obviously there's a lot of divergence in how you both would deal with that large problem.
Yeah, so I mean... Yeah, I would say that in theory it would be a good thing if if all non-human animals were phased out, basically. That is my view.
Well, Magnus, your mic went off again.
So what I was saying was simply, can you hear me now, brother?
Yes, I can. Yes.
So what I was saying was simply that, I do agree that it would be best if there were no non-human animals, if they could just be phased out peacefully. But that's very different from saying that we should go out and kill them, or that we should advocate for that. Because, again, that comes down to the pragmatic issue, that this is something that people would react very negatively to, and that they would just, basically, we would antagonize people and push them away.
I don't think. I think that's like saying you're going to antagonize somebody who's already accepted euthanasia, and the idea that they would put grandma to sleep a little bit early, right? She could live another year, but they'll give her enough morphine to put her away now, and they understand why you do that. You put it away. You finish the problem. You fix the problem. So I think this is a false argument that somehow people can't get that. Sometimes you have to break some eggs to make an omelet kind of argument that yes, it isn't pretty, it isn't great, but this is what you're going to have to do to stop the infestation. That you're not going to get any perfect solutions. You're going to have to, it's like this coronavirus. Everybody wants a perfect solution. Well, perfect solution isn't going to show up. There's decisions to make. It's going to cost you an awful lot of money, which means that's death too. Every time you lose $5,000 or $10,000 here or there, you can buy a human life for $10,000. You can buy a lot more than one. So we know that the expenditure of resources is life. So these are just factual equations. And so I'm arguing that yes, people can understand that you have to bite the bullet, and you're not talking about doing anything unnecessary, nothing gratuitous. No one goes out and hunts the animals and has fun shooting them or any of these kind of silly scenarios. It's a sad fact. Okay, and you deal with the sad fact. Like I said, you catch a feral cat and you humanely put it to sleep. You don't cut its nuts off and throw it back in the wild. I mean, it's cruel. It's counterproductive. The solution is to fix the problem, and the solutions require some sacrifice. They're just not free. Everybody wants the solution to be almost like I should make money. I want to make money on the solution. I want my life improved with the solution. No, solutions are actual work. Okay, so you have to lose something. You have to give up something to have your shiny city on a hill. You can't build it out of nothing. You can't build it out of hope. And to rescue something is just as much work as to build something. Okay, it's the same thing. So you can't build it for free. Why do you think you can rescue it for free?
No, but I mean, I'm not talking about any free solutions or perfect solutions. Again, I mean, I'm not saying that. Yeah, obviously that we can find any painless way to phase out sentient beings in nature. I mean, the point is just that, here's the simple solution.
I'm just saying the end game is going to be the end game. I'm just saying to try to do it in any kind of phase out way, number one, would cause so much environmental mess. Okay, I mean, let's say we phased out wildebeest. Well, then the lions starve and all these other animals overbreed and all this other stuff happens. So obviously, phasing out isn't going to work. It's either you wipe them out or you don't wipe them out. And it's all just about how. So you either do it quick and painless. That's what you're looking for. Quick and painless end to the existence. It was better never to have been. There's absolutely no reason to keep maintaining its existence. So if you humanely, without it even knowing it happens in like 3/4 of a millisecond. Why the heck would anybody say bad solution? Oh, that was terrible. What a horror. There's no horror here.
Yeah, I believe most people would see a lot of horror there.
Oh, well, you say most people would see that based on what logic? Again, it's like saying I see horror when I put the Karen Ann Quinlan to sleep, when I finally turn her respirator off. Is everybody supposed to say, oh, how horrible, that was awful, let's kill that guy? He turned off a respirator.
Well, what I can say is that my experience is that people do react extremely negatively just to the argument that...
All right. Well, I'm just saying then they don't believers then. If they're reacting that way, then they're not believers, obviously. Obviously, the only people that react to Karen Ann Quinlan being humanely put to sleep are the religious nuts. The only people who react are people who have a political agenda or some other attitude. It has nothing to do with the facts. The facts are demonstratable and clear that this is a good thing, not a bad thing, that keeping people alive artificially sucks. Nobody wants to be Karen Ann Quinlan. No one wants to be in that position that's rational. Only a religious kook would say, yes, keep me alive. We know that's the truth. So I'm just saying the argument's no more complicated than explaining why it is humane to turn the respirator off.
Yeah, I basically agree that it's not a very complicated argument to argue that, in my view, it isn't that the sentient condition in nature is extremely bad and that it would be better if it weren't there. But again, I don't think most people are going to accept that.
I guess if I can ask, I mean, what is the alternative? I mean, if what Inmendham is saying is that the putting nature in hospice, essentially, the euthanasia road to alleviating wild animal suffering, if that is so reprehensible, what is exactly the alternative? And that is something that very few people have really put forth. I mean, what exactly is the alternative? What is the other solution that would not include that? And what if that is the only possible solution?
Right, possible solution, but I think it's, and again, this is perhaps not going to be received well, but I would refer back to these other kinds of risks again that I would argue, have to take seriously. And I think if we become associated with ideas and views that people see as repugnant when it comes to, for example, what we do about the problem of suffering in nature, I think there is a very real risk that we will make our prospects worse when it comes to reducing suffering in these other future scenarios that I, again, would argue that we should take very seriously.
I would agree with you that the optics of it are not great and it's a problem, but I also fear that if we put that above what the only solution might be, we may miss our only opportunity of actually be able to do something real about it.
So, right, and but here I would again just point out that the suffering that is going on in nature, I mean, it's unfortunately, so there are a few considerations here. So one is that I would argue that it's just extremely unlikely that people are ever going to decide to do something about it on a large scale, and especially of that kind of nature that is, I mean, so altruistic actions where we try to reduce wild animal suffering by, basically by extermination. I think that's extremely unlikely to
Okay, so just tell me it's unlikely that we'll ever have a right to die. It's unlikely that any of these other subjects where progress has been made. Clear progress has been made on the subject of the right to die. Clear progress. People are moving to understanding the empathy of saying life can be harsh, brutal, and unnecessarily harmful. And you're saying it's impossible for the human race to evolve any kind of notion that animals are in jeopardy. That if I explain to them that 10,000 immature sea turtles have to be killed for every mature turtle, they can't understand that argument. They can't understand that that's basically serial killing. That you're killing thousands of fully capable organisms in brutal and horrible way to make one mature one that can lay eggs. They won't be able to understand that logic, that that's a horrible circumstance, and yes, clean it up.
Yeah, I think many people can actually appreciate that argument. Presently, many don't, but I think what is extremely unlikely is that people will ever embrace...
Okay, I don't care about this unlikely part. I just care about a rational argument explaining how you say it can't happen. All right, because that's what I'm not seeing. I'm not seeing this argument explaining how when I say to you that humans are getting smarter, that they are becoming more intelligent, that people like Sam Harris do show up and they point out you don't have any free will, silly person, you're a frickin' robot, and they do buy it, they do understand it, they do catch on, all right, that there's every evidence that as people become more and more intelligent, they become more and more cynical, they recognize the game is incredibly stupid, that deserve has nothing to do with it, that this thing is a real crapshoot. I mean, who's going to get shot next doesn't have anything to do with how big an asshole you are or any of this justice thing. The whole game the humans are playing is now mocked by people. I could also point out, just as an incidental on this whole idea that humans love making babies. Well, how come there's not a huge video game industry making the I just had a baby game? How come that's not the #1 video game in America, having a baby? Well, because it's a shitty game and everybody knows it and nobody would play it.
Right. So again, I'm not saying that we can't make a difference. I'm not saying that we can't make people understand that the problem of suffering in nature is human.
Well, you did just say that. You said they can't understand because you're saying that somehow they're going to understand in a different way than I understand. And no, I think they can understand that the feral cat problem can't be solved with a magical solution where we fairy tale go out there and say we're going to give every cat a wonderful life and everything will be just fine. Because we know, number one, it'll cost way too much. There aren't enough homes for all these cats. There's no possible way to fix the problem that way. And they can understand that it's just not practical to do it any other way than as quickly and as painlessly as possible, and this is the only choice. We have to say it's enough. This cat had enough fun, the game's over. It's going to die anyway. It doesn't have anything to do. It doesn't need to live so it can cure cancer. You can't justify its existence because it's going to protect the universe from sentient life. No, the feral cat isn't going to do any of those things. So there's absolutely no reason to continue its existence if you can just put it to sleep while it's already asleep. Let's just kill it while it's asleep, and now it'll never even know anything happened. It can't possibly be defined as a harm. You're saying this is too hard an intelligent argument for people to understand, that there's no way I could be harmed if I drop dead in my sleep. That there would be absolutely no way for you to say, oh, the pain, how horrible, he tortured, he was suffered. No, people would say, I get it, he didn't suffer. It's sad, but he's dead, but unless he had some use, I really couldn't care less. I mean, if Portugal blew up tomorrow, if a black hole hit the Earth and Portugal got sucked into it and was gone, it just didn't exist anymore, would I be a horrible person if I said, gee, I couldn't care less?
And this doesn't really relate so very closely to the practicalities of, I mean, are people ever going to, so first of all, would they accept an extermination option for nature if it were possible? I think most people wouldn't. I don't think you could convince most people.
All right, that's fine. I'm saying then you might as well forget about having any conversation about reality then. You might as well forget about educating them that apples are different than oranges. You might as well say, I can't explain to them 3 dimensions or something. It is such a simple argument. And again, I'm going to argue they are understanding. That's why we are making progress in terms of understanding that life isn't free. It isn't some sort of free lunch, that it comes with a huge cost. People are getting those arguments. And I say, so you're just saying to me, nobody will ever have a rational policy about feral cats because they're always going to try to have a fairy tale solution. They'll never accept a real solution. And I'm saying, bull. They will accept
about
it.
Feral cats, so there are some relevant differences there. But
there's no relevant difference to the underlying understanding. There's absolutely no difference.
How would you ever actually have the proposed extermination solution? Because
you understand physics. If you understand physics, all it is a physics question. All you're saying is can I make the planet Earth too toxic for anything to live on it? Yes, I can.
So it's not a physics question. It's a question about how can you possibly convince people to do something that would. Yeah, I mean, they would also...
Because it's intrinsically logical. If they believe nature is killing a bunch of animals in a horribly, unnecessarily torturous manner, that the equation doesn't make any sense, 10,000 killed children for one adult, that it doesn't make any sense. As soon as they know it doesn't make any sense, that it's a huge loss, they're going to say, how do I get those red numbers off my book? How do I get those deficits out? How do I get those debts off my credit card?
You don't think people are too selfish to ever take that kind of...
Wait, selfish how? How is it selfish? Again, they've already accepted their own extinction, presumably, in this equation. They've already accepted that humans won't exist. How is selfishness in the equation anymore?
Well, I think humans will continue to be selfish. I don't...
like I said, so you don't believe that they will go to extinct, that you think that somehow, even though the individual humans all say, I really don't want to have 10 kids, I really don't want the responsibility of being subjected to ridicule because I made a decision for somebody else, they get all of this logic, and you're saying that can't happen. All right, it's fine. You don't believe it can happen. Fine. I'm saying everything is an indication that intelligence realizes the game is stupid, and that's where we're heading. Intelligent people will realize the game is it's unfruitful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid I am more pessimistic than you in that respect.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying we've already won. And you're saying it's not possible, it's not probable. We're already on the brink of it right now?
Well, I don't really see that. I mean, the human
Okay, well, go
population
back 1,000 years. How many babies did the average woman have?
Yeah, surely a lot more than today. But again, yeah, I mean, so the fact that birth rates are declining, I don't see that as a compelling reason to think that in the future humans are going to decide to basically exterminate all sentient life.
Well, the two subjects are a little bit different, but I just pointed out why they would decide. You're saying they will never believe that it's wrong to kill 10,000 baby turtles to make one adult. They'll never understand that argument. You're just telling me they'll never get past religion. I'm saying, of course, they're going to get past religion. Okay, it's happening. It's already a ridiculous. People are already easily mocked for being so foolish to believe in these silly fairy tales. If anyone takes evolution seriously, there's no way except playing silly games for silly reasons to think it's anything else but a horror story.
Yeah, I agree. But the question is, again, I'm not at all optimistic that most humans are ever actually going to concede that.
Well, I guess you think very highly of yourself because you're thinking that they can't figure out what you figured out.
It's not that they can't, but it's just that they're not necessarily that motivated.
They're not what?
Motivated.
Motivated to do what? Again, I wasn't motivated to give a damn. I was the selfishest creepoid on this planet, and it fell on me, unfortunately, like a little ton of bricks, fell right on my little selfish head, and I figured, oh shit, this isn't just about me, is it? Oh damn. I was hoping this whole show was just for my self-indulgence. Oh, there's responsibilities here. Oh, I figured it out. If I can figure it out, anybody can figure it out.
Well, unfortunately, most people don't seem to.
Well, again, you're saying most people don't seem to, and I'm saying the only thing that's stopping them from seeing it is just mass psychology. As soon as the psychology changes, again, the vegan argument wins. When people hear it, it wins. It's the only people who it doesn't work on are the ones who are in their safe little club. I'm saying as soon as veganism becomes a 40% equation or a 30% of the population, and it's always in people's faces, okay, it's going to win, and it's going to win more and more. And as their numbers shrink, their ability to make an argument or defend themselves will also shrink. Just like somebody who says, I love dog fights, or I love cockfights, or I love bullfighting. All of those things went away, and people who believed that was good were mocked and ridiculed as just cruel, evil people. Right now, in the Islam, they have dog fights and cockfights, and they all go there and bet and enjoy it. Do they think you're doing it for any other reason than because they're stupid? No, the only reason they're doing it is because they're stupid.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to say to that. I mean, so the view that we can convince most people, I mean, again, I think veganism is also a separate subject, right? Because it doesn't even have to question people's existence, right? So we can just have technological innovations making animal products obsolete, and in that way, I mean, I think that's very likely to happen, just even because of technological progress. And
well, you think it's likely. I think that's rather unlikely, just because it'll always be expensive. So I think that's a pipe dream. But yes, right now they make little fake hamburgers out of crap. It's not about taste. People don't eat animals because it's about taste. Okay, there's lots of vegan foods that are perfectly tasteful. Okay, I mean, I could eat potato chips all day long. I could eat potato chips. People still eat meat out of tradition. Nothing else. It's just a habit. It's like smoking cigarettes. They're addicted to it. That's it. Nothing else.
Yeah, I agree. That's largely the case. But again, when I'm saying innovation, I'm not just talking about. I mean, I'm also talking about innovation in plant-based products. Just to clarify.
Well, I'm just saying I don't think you need it. What you need is innovation in education, and that's already happening. Like I said, the internet exists. Kids are growing up in a world where they know the choices out there to take. Okay, when I was a kid, I didn't even vegans weren't even a real thing. They were like some sort of anemic, sick people who couldn't eat meat. Okay, it had nothing to do with a philosophy. All right, so I'm just saying that clearly the tide has turned, okay, and it is going up. It's moving in the right direction.
Well, I agree there in the case of veganism, but I think that is disanalogous from the case of humans deciding to exterminate themselves.
Again, you keep saying it in those contexts, and I'm saying there's plenty of humans who make the personal choice not to have children. Why are they making the choice? Because they recognize the fact that it is a jeopardy. It's a mushy ground that it does not provide guarantees, that it's on them, that they can't just say God told me so, everybody else was doing it. Those excuses don't work anymore. It worked in the 50s, it ain't going to work in the 2020s. It's a new world, okay, and you're going to be pressured to explain yourselves, and the more people have to explain themselves, the more we win.
Yeah, I still don't see how that's an argument for why it's likely that humans are going to decide.
Because it's too frickin' obvious. That's why they're going to decide. Because it's ABC mathematics. All you have to accept is there's no God. You accept that evolution is insanely cruel. What else do I have to believe now? What's the next step? There's barely no other step. I'm going to stop insane cruelty. Oh yeah, that sounds like a rational thing to do.
Yeah, but so yeah, but again, talking in the context of just a purely secular worldview or ethic, there are many people who have very optimistic ethical views, and these are highly educated people.
I'm just saying that the majority of people, if I tell them the evolution story, I will argue to you that 70% to 30%, okay? There'll be 30% who turn it into a fable, and I'm saying the 70% will get the real conclusion that nature is dumb. It's unintelligent design. It doesn't know any better, so yes, it's torturing a bunch of animals because it just doesn't know any better.
Right, but I still don't see. So, you think that most humans are going to become pessimists, essentially?
I think they're all going to realize that, yes, we're living in a world where we can't make deserve have anything to do with it. We just can't make a fair game. We can't create a game on this field where a bunch of unfairness doesn't happen, where a bunch of disproportional amounts of suffering are imposed on some players than other players for arbitrary reasons that have nothing to do with the performance of the player. Yes, good people get cancer. Good people get double cancer. I mean, it's just a fucking mess as a game. It's gladiator war, and I'm saying most of the human beings, as we grew up and we figured out that it really sucks to feed people to lions, we're just going to do the same thing here. We're going to figure out that it really sucks to put a sentient being in silly jeopardy. Why put them in jeopardy? Yes, they're better off not in jeopardy.
Yeah, unfortunately, most people just don't agree with that, and that includes...
I know, right now they don't. Most people don't agree right now. I'm saying, what is the trend? The trend on all of these subjects of ethics are improving. We're doing a lot better than we did 2,000 years ago. I mean, people would not even tolerate watching their kids die now, right? 200 years ago, people watched their children routinely die. Do you think people would do that over and over now? Very few people now, modern people, sit there and watch their first baby die and say, let's do it again.
Yeah, that's obviously true, but there are also still many people who think that happiness outweighs suffering. I mean, it's...
I know there's many people who are still religious. I'm just saying, of course, I'm not arguing that the condition now is the condition. I'm saying look at what the evolution of intelligence, and I'm saying on all of these subjects of empathy and getting it. Okay, on all the subjects of ethics and empathy, we're making progress. We're not going backwards, we're going forwards. So that's my argument, that's the trend, and there's every reason for it to have its conclusion in the fact that we understand that this condition of sentience is a trap. It's a trap created by evolution, and it doesn't have the intention of making something valuable. It just has the intention of creating winners and lots of losers.
Yeah, so I agree that more and more people are becoming much more concerned about suffering and do realize, many of those points that you raise about, the sentient condition and, in particular, like the horror of suffering. But still, I'm not convinced that most people ever going to be pessimists. I mean, I do also see...
Okay, let's just say there's an argument on the internet. We put the two arguments on the internet. You're basically saying that the religious argument is going to be more compelling than the factual argument. You know, that somehow people are going to choose the ignorant argument rather than the intelligent argument. I'm saying there's clearly we win. We have the intelligent, logical, honest argument. They have the dishonest, fabulistic, hope bullshit argument. Okay, there is no rational argument for any reason to be optimistic. It's just plain silly. What would your optimism be? We'll create a virtual reality where we'll create virtual beings that are already addicted to something, and then we'll give them their heroin. We can make it a virtual reality where you just chase heroin all day, and you get your heroin, and then you just take a nap, and then you go chase some more heroin and get a nap. I mean, yeah, that's just nonsense. Okay, anybody who's wasting their time thinking of these idiotic scenarios of some future for the human race, there is no future. We're here to fix problems. The only problems, we're here to play a very stupid game. We're not here to play a very smart game. There is no smart game to play with these tools. The tools are bones, rocks, and sticks. There are no intelligent purposes. There's no intelligent tools. It's a dumb game that only dumb creatures should be forced to play. Well, and they shouldn't be forced to play, obviously. Nothing smart would play these dumb games.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I'm skeptical that most humans are going to be
convinced. All right. Well, I don't think your skepticism is reasonable. I think there's every indication of progress in all of these ethical subjects, and so I think we're winning big. And you're just saying you're naysaying the win.
No. So I should actually clarify, and this is perhaps a good opportunity for me to plug my forthcoming book that I've just written, a book called Suffering-Focused Ethics: Defense and Implications. So I very much have. Basically defended the suffering-focused views that I think, we, all three of us, share, and that also, so in particular, I defend a negative utilitarian view in one chapter, but more broadly, I make a case for why we should focus on reducing suffering in practice. But so, to clarify, I do agree with that argument, and I do also put that argument out there, but I don't expect that argument. I think it's the winning argument on an intellectual level, but I don't expect it to win at the social level, because I think people are going to be too resistant to accept it. And I think our best hope is to try to convince as many people as we can, but I'm not optimistic that that's ever going to be.
Well, I just think that the naysaying about the likelihood is like saying to the first guy who went to the Colosseum with a sign that says, "This is cruel and stupid," okay, and stood up there with a sign, "This is cruel and stupid," and you're basically saying to him, well, you're wasting your time. They can't be taught. They're never going to learn. They can't figure it out. You're just wasting your time.
I wouldn't have written the book I wrote. I mean, I wouldn't have written any books if that was my view, that we couldn't make a difference. But I'm just still, I don't think that...
Well, what you're defining as a difference, I'm really not interested in, frankly. That's like somebody's telling me that we fixed the feral cat problem, or we have enough of a right to die, that the job is done, we're there, we did it. No, these are not solutions. We either go for the solution, or I'm not really interested in the conversation. Again, I mean, making life better for a first few stinking humans is not really fixing anywhere close to the magnitude of the problem. So, what is this? This isn't anything. This is like saving goldfish in Nazi Germany. Let's go have a war to go save a couple of goldfish, and we'll say we did our job. I mean, this is, it's not even close to shutting the Colosseum down.
So to clarify my view, my view is that we should try to reduce suffering as much as we possibly can. But I am just a lot more pessimistic about, or rather I should clarify that again, the best we can do to reduce suffering probably does lie in minimizing the risk of worst case outcomes. And I think that's something that we shouldn't overlook. Again, it comes back to the expected value calculation of just how bad those
right. So anti-natalists should waste their time doing papers on why nanotechnology shouldn't be allowed, or why nobody should be allowed to experiment on gene manipulation, or why we shouldn't cut the heads off pigs and keep them alive in space. I don't think those are constructive arguments that get to the core of the subject that'll do antinatalism any good whatsoever, is to be distracted by a bunch of superfluous, nonsensical, what could silly humans possibly do that's dumber than what they've already done? When the whole argument is, how much have humans improved and how much closer are we getting to the real goal, which is to shut the Colosseum down?
Well, but even if we've improved a lot, I mean, future progress is not guaranteed, and it's not guaranteed that we will avoid.
I'm just saying there's no reason to believe there's anything in its way. So you're saying there's something in its way, and I'm saying there's absolutely no reason to see anything wrong with these trend lines. They're all in the right direction, and they're all well based on the fact that we are separating ourselves from fables. Human beings are separating themselves from fabulistic nonsense. It's happening more and more every day. We're winning that war, except the fact that the third world is way outbreeding the reasoned world, the educated world, and all of those brains are not going to be educated, and that's a real tragedy.
Well, I think there are reasons for pessimism. For example, you see polarization.
Okay. What good does it do, though? What good does it do? What good does this do the soldiers, right? I'm going to go invade Normandy tomorrow. I don't need you on my boat, okay? Captain whoever. I don't need this pessimist who says there's lots of reason to think you're going to lose. You're just going to die on that beach. You guys can't win. You got too few soldiers. There's no way you're going to win. Okay, you don't have big enough tanks. You're outnumbered. You can't possibly win. What good is this? What good is this naysaying, nitpicking, you can't win argument? How does it in any way advance the cause?
So yeah, I mean, how I would define winning is to, minimize risks of future suffering, like prevent future suffering. That's basically how I understand.
Right, so you're not really an antinatalist. You don't want to fix the problem. You just want to sit there and minimize it somehow. How can I minimize? Minimize the nuclear bomb, minimize the virus, minimize. You don't want the cure. You don't want the prevention. You're just after this silly Band-Aid. Band-Aid. Okay, fine. You're a Band-Aidite. Okay. I'm not a Band-Aidite, okay? I'm a cure or preventite. I have no interest in spending the rest of eternity putting Band-Aids on wounds that shouldn't exist.
I mean, yeah, it would be ideal if there were no suffering in the world and if we could just turn it all down. But what I'm saying is that I don't see that as being...
I don't see why you don't see that. That's the problem, okay? I don't see why you don't see that. When I'm saying every indicator is green light, green light, green light, green light, moving right up to the red button. And so there's like a runway with green lights and the red buttons at the end of the runway. All the green lights are on and we're heading right for it.
Right, but so then that comes back to the earlier point that if we already headed there, then it's not necessarily much of a priority to push for it. I mean, we should worry about the scenarios where, there are red lights coming up, right? I mean, and where it's much, much worse than red lights, where things get much, much worse. And again, so if
obviously working towards it helps blow the wind harder. So why would I just say, well, I think wind will knock it down by itself. Okay, there'll be enough wind to knock it down by itself. Okay, I actually believe that. I actually do believe it's already in motion, and people won't even have to believe in antinatalism to go extinct. I think the human race is going to sabotage itself in some way or another anyway. But that doesn't fix the animal problem. So again, without the humans, the animal problem can't be fixed. So that's not to my advantage. Human destruction is not to my advantage. Human construction is to my advantage. I need the humans to press the button. So they have to get to the end. They have to be integral to the process. So I can't just say the wind's going to blow human beings down. That's not going to solve my problem. I need the wind to be in the right direction, and I need to add to it.
Right. So yeah. So again, coming back to what my perspective is. So I would argue that my view is that we should take the actions that prevent the most suffering possible. That is my view. And what the scenario and the actions that you just described, it is a relatively minor difference that you push slightly in that direction that you say that we're already going in. And what I'm saying is that we can potentially make a bigger difference by working on risks of things going very, very
right.
badly.
So if we were both malaria people who wanted to fight malaria, we would obviously be in two different camps, because you're basically in the let's make a whole bunch of netting to keep the mosquitoes off of people, And I would expend all the resources on finding a way to kill the mosquitoes or to disengage the malaria virus itself or bacteria. So I would be totally focused on the cure. I wouldn't spend any money on the nets, okay? Because I know the long term is going to love me for finding a cure. That's going to win in the long term. That's the only equation I really care about, is the long-term equation. I don't care about any short-term gains and, switching back and forth. The only equation, all the math has to be done on the long term. So I'm saying let's invest in the long-term solution, not some, we, made a lot of Band-Aids and we healed a lot of wounds that should never have existed if we cured the disease.
So yeah, using your analogy to malaria, I would say what my focus then, if we had to analogize it, what I would say is that I would focus on doing the research that minimizes the risk that this disease, that it mutates and that it gets much, much worse and causes a lot more suffering.
Well, again,
and
most of these things, most probable cases that malaria gets less effective, not more effective. So that's not even what viruses do or even microbes. They get less effective when they randomly win. They didn't win for a reason. Coronavirus doesn't infect us for any good reason. So it has no plan to get worse. It's going to get less effective, not more effective.
Yeah, but the point is, in the human case, there are serious risks that things could spiral out and, go out of control and get very, very bad.
Well, okay, so you didn't really answer the question, though. So would you spend the money on researching how to kill mosquitoes and malaria, or would you spend the money on nets?
Yeah, I don't think this is a very good analogy to the situation we're in with respect to future suffering.
I think it is a perfect analogy. The point is that you're either going to work towards winning the war or you're going to work towards creating some kind of state where Nazis and Americans live together or something. You're going to blend them both into each other. You're going to compromise them.
We're faced by many different problems here. So it's a better analogy might be to consider different diseases, right? So what future diseases could plague us? Well, partly we have all those that exist presently, but there's also the risk of future diseases that haven't emerged yet.
Well, okay, I'll still argue that I couldn't care less about this stupid human equation. So it is such a small fraction of the sentient torture taking place on Earth that I could not care less, okay, in sense of I'm going to devote my efforts to putting Band-Aids on a tiny percentage of the real wounds in the world. There are a billion rapes taking place, and you're saying, well, let's go find the ones that are just us, our kind of people, and we'll worry about those rapes and just screw the rest of them.
Well, that's a complete straw man. That's not my view. So,
I'm just saying, how does a human virus or any condition that's going to degrade the existence of human life have anything other than saying humans are somehow more important than these animals?
No, that is very much not what I said. That was not the point. So the point of the analogy was simply to say we can't just look at one disease. Like the problem of trying to reduce future suffering, we are faced by many different problems.
All right, well, just explain to me how the animal kingdom is facing all these difficult problems. I'm saying they couldn't be in a worse condition. You really can't make it any worse in nature. How would it go badder? How exactly could it possibly go badder?
Well, so if humans are to do anything about the problem of suffering in nature, that requires human civilization to be in some kind of, non-chaotic state, right? And even if we only take that issue, that human civilization could devolve into complete chaos. There are many risks there, and there are many things to take seriously.
So again, you're just arguing the ideology argument again. You're just arguing the ideology argument again. You're saying they have the wrong ideology. This is not about some other thing getting in our way. The only thing in our way is the ideology of the human beings. The fact that they don't like this argument from nature. Okay, they want an argument from God. They want arguments from special circumstances. They want some scapegoat. They want some scapegoat, perfect solution. There's no perfect solution. So yes, they have to grow up and realize there's no perfect solution.
So are you saying that there are no risks of human cooperation breaking down completely?
I'm saying the risk is minimal, but I'm saying, of course, I believe human beings can blow it all up tomorrow. They can screw over each other. This whole idea of what if the whole economy does actually collapse and we have this whole rich man, poor man war thing? Yeah, that could be a huge distraction. That could take us way back. That could take us back 300 years or 500 years. We could all end up back in the Stone Age. We could all end up going to streams to get some drinking water. So yeah, all of that shit's quite possible. And it would be quite regrettable if we do that. But that's not the subject of antinatalism. That's a separate subject.
It is a subject of failure modes in terms of how we can fail to reduce future suffering, though. I mean, we can't imagine totalitarian governments taking over essentially.
It's really not the subject, though. It's really not all these possible ways humans can fail on other subjects is not the subject of antinatalism. So why would I waste my time arguing for humans? Please be safe. Please be safe. Okay, hide your nuclear bomb so you don't blow each other up, and let's all have a little, kumbaya thing and try to all get along and love each other, and we'll all work on that, and we'll write some songs. We are the world, la 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 la, and somehow we have mitigated against this horrible disaster where human beings make a mess. Well, I can't stop human beings from making messes. All I can argue for is the fact that the intelligent human beings, the ones that do get a high school education, do seem to behave a little more responsibly, and that seems to be a very good trend. And they are getting it that, yes, there's no point in torturing people. It's a bad idea. Only God could think that was a good idea. So yes, let's not have things suffering for no good reason. They are getting it. They do want a more humane world. They do want their meat without the suffering. They do want the animals treated better and all this kind of crap. So they're already on this road. And you're saying instead of arguing for that road, I should worry about all these other directions human beings can go in. Yes, of course, they can fall off the staircase for lots of reasons. They can get drunk on anything and fall off the staircase. I'm saying I don't see the point in being an advocate for a specific subject by saying let's do some general, let's all be safe theme thing.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's quite a straw man. That's not what I'm talking about. What I am talking about, and again, you said it's not relevant to antinatalism, but again, antinatalism is not my primary concern. My primary concern is what actions can we take that prevent future suffering.
Right, okay. Well, I'll say that my primary concern is ethylism. It's my only concern. It's the only math that makes any sense. It's the only facts from which to base everything. There is no other facts that matter. All right, so any of these plans involved in worrying about what human beings are going to do have nothing to do with the arguments I have to make. It has nothing to do with me taking steps that are positive in terms of creating responsible human beings, and you're not going to do this with this pussy bullshit I love you rhetoric crap where we all have some fantasy about some wonderful future we're heading to. No, there's no wonderful future to head to. It's the fact that it doesn't exist.
There, but they're not mine. But
well, anyway. Okay, the audience will judge what you've said versus what I've said. I mean, it's clear that, in my opinion, you're arguing for some pessimism that there's no reason to believe exists, and there's every reason to march forward, not backward.
But yeah, I mean, again, that was stated so vaguely that I don't know what that even means. But just to clarify on my end, I mean, what I'm saying is, again, and I thought at least that we were in agreement at the level of normative ethics on some kind of negative utilitarianism. That I don't even bother with that kind of rhetoric. What the fuck? Go ahead. Tell me what negative utilitarian is a means besides saying there's no real goods in the world. You're just fixing bads. What else is negative utilitarianism? What does it mean? You can't ever get above the surface of the quicksand. You can just get yourself out of quicksand. There's no winning. That's negative utilitarianism, in my opinion. No, that's not necessarily a good encapsulation of what negative utilitarianism entails, but it basically just comes down to trying to minimize suffering. And yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah, in what frame? The whole frame, the whole history, what was the best choice for all of the future, or what was the best choice for the present? That's the question I'm saying should always be answered by everyone with the right answer, which is save the future. The future's bigger than us. The future deserves our efforts to preserve it. If we can save 10 million people from drowning by drowning once, we have every responsibility to get jumping into that damn water.
So that would essentially be, yes, the implication of negative utilitarianism. But my point is just that if we do have the view that we should minimize future suffering, then we have to be open-minded about how that's best done, and we can't just be, to assume certain answers and be dogmatic and overconfident about them. I mean, it's very much an open question how we can best reduce future suffering, and I think to deny that it's an open question, that is just...
Okay, if I want to prevent drunk driving, how do I do it? I mean, there's certain things that are realistic. They're going to have something to do with drunk driving, and there's things you could do that won't have anything to do with drunk driving. So you're saying that I should make a political deal with, the Church of Latter-day Saints because they have lots of members, and I can get them motivated, and I can do some political deals, and blah 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 blah. And I'm saying that all of this kind of minutia about strategy doesn't really have anything to do with it, because the strategy, the only thing you need to do is improve people's understanding. If they understand the subject, then they'll do the right thing, and the only thing in the way is their misunderstanding of the subject. So once they understand the subject of Earth isn't Three Bears stories and happily ever after stories and Jeebus and Mohammed and all this other horse crap, as soon as they understand that's not the narrative here, that's not the game that's being played on Earth, they'll get it.
Right. So I think we have here reached an impasse. I mean, so I just don't agree with that. I think that is, extremely unlikely that people are ever going to come around to that.
Right, because we all did it by magic. So all the other people out there who get it, who understand that there's a huge amount of pain and suffering that's completely unnecessary, and we're just justifying it because we're part of it. We're tyrannosauruses with big teeth, so we're saying big teeth are cool, and yes, everything needs to chomp chomp. We're just making rationalizations to defend the existence of our silly game we're playing because it's our silly game. Not because it's a good game, but because it's our silly game. And every anti-natalist who's already an anti-natalist already knows this. Every evolist, let's say, already knows the argument I'm making here, right? And they know that it's obvious. It's not hard to see. It's right here in front of us. You could do the equation. I don't want to be born a slave. I don't want to be born a sea turtle getting pecked to death by a bird. I don't want to be born. I wouldn't let it happen to me. I wouldn't let it happen to a dog. I wouldn't let it happen to a Sasquatch. I wouldn't let anything have this fate of being tortured for a silly game. A silly game that accomplishes absolutely nothing. And you're saying people can't understand that. And I'm saying, oh, come on, it's too simple. The only thing that stops them from understanding it is belief in God or belief in unicorns. You get rid of those two things and the game is over.
I do think that there's reason to believe that eventually there is a real potential for people to recognize the subject of antinatalism and efilism. And I've said this in past shows and whatnot. I think there is a huge possibility that people will come to a point where they recognize it as sort of the final step in a civil rights movement, that there's really nowhere else to go from there with how you advocate for the elimination of harm. The civil right of not being imposed upon, of not as one sentient voice, of not further imposing on the animals.
Ultimate victim mitigation.
And and I do think that that's if people do become more cognizant of that, the consequences of that, I think, could be really quite huge in getting a much, much, much larger strata of the populace to understand what we're saying. So I do think that there is reason to be less pessimistic about that understanding, because I think people can recognize this as a civil rights argument.
I think they can recognize that it's really simple science. It's not that complicated. Me accepting that I'm no better than everybody else. My brain creates sensations, other brains create sensations, and that some brains are trapped in a retarded, they're retarded brains. The animals are essentially retarded. And I should look at them as a bunch of retards eating each other. And what would I do if a bunch of retards were eating each other? I would stop it. I wouldn't sit there and let it happen.
Right.
But go ahead, Magnus. Sorry.
Just in relation to the point you just made, Amanda. So I would just say that, well, even if we can see that there's a significant probability that it will be something that most people agree with, I would still just argue that we need to take these other risks, these other future possibilities very, very seriously, and that we should address those.
Well, I definitely don't support doing it badly. So I'm with you in the sense that, yes, I don't want to do this badly. So, but I also think
it's not just about doing it badly. Sorry, it's also about just the possibility that we won't have control of the future, that things will spiral out, and that recent arguments will just completely take a back seat. And there are many ways in which this could happen.
I understand what you're saying. I also think that the reality is either it's us trying to take some control of it, or it's allowing nature to take control of it. And there's only those two options.
I think that's a false choice. I mean, especially so. Again, this here we speak as though it's like we are humanity and we can speak on behalf of humanity. But rather, I mean, humanity is not necessarily.
Well, they're all reasoning machines. That was another line in your book, okay? That you didn't concede in your book, in my opinion, a simple fact. Our brains do work. Our brains are intended to see reality so we avoid real dangers. Real lions, real tigers, real bears. We don't walk into trees. We learn how to do things the right way because our brain is intended to get the right answer. It is not built to get wrong answers. It's not built to be confused. It's built to get it right. It's built to do logic. Okay? It's not built to be illogical.
I think it is in many ways. I mean, here I would recommend listeners to check out the book The Elephant in the Brain. I mean, there are so many ways in which the human mind is extremely logical, extremely inconsistent, and good at self-deception and just denying truths.
I would argue that no, they always get the tree is in the way. I can't go through trees. Okay, so when it matters, when the rubber hits the road, we get the right answers. Clearly, rationalizations were an invention of modern man. It wasn't an invention of primitive man. They would be pretty honest with you about what they were thinking and doing. Modern man is the compulsive liar, the one making up excuses and rationalizations. So clearly people have made philosophical mush out of the universe and lied about its function. And it's that simple. And those lies are convenient. I will agree. All right, but that's a deliberate act, okay, that isn't the function. The function is to be logical. They're applying logic in the sense they're contriving theories that make their kind better. Our race wins. Our race is better than their race. They're justifying they're just rationalizing, and that's a crime we can commit, no doubt about it. But that can be fixed with education.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not seeing that happen at this point. But I don't know, maybe
I'm seeing it dramatically. Like I said, the Colosseum as a broken down artifact is evidence that human beings can see it.
We can in some ways, yeah, no doubt.
Sorry, Magnus, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Since I think we have reached a bit of an impasse and we are over the 2-hour mark, I think this might be a good time to end this. Do either of you have any closing thoughts?
I just want to say, I guess, thank you for taking part in this, for having me here.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, like I said, after reading the book, I was, I just figured it's going to be contentious because I just saw it as, it's not grounded. I mean, the story is evolution. It's the only story. It's where the whole thing has to grow out of that truth. If you don't believe in evolution and you don't believe it's cruel and unnecessarily wasteful, then you're really not getting the subject.
I mean, I think it is. So, yeah.
Right. Well, it's easily fixed. It's a dumb force that created it. We can certainly outdo a dumb force. We're smarter than dumb forces.
But part of it is also that now we have humans who are, doing...
Well, by we, I mean the humans are quite capable of getting the ABCs here. This is ABC, and the only way you break it is by belligerently doing it. You can only get it wrong by forcing it to be wrong.
I think many people are intent on doing that.
I know. There are many people right now, today. Yes, today there are that many people. But I'm saying every baby born now has the internet, has all kinds of opportunities to see reality that we never even had. They're more likely, to gravitate to a truth than they are to these old, dead fables.
But, okay, we were trying to stop this thing. But so I would just say to that, but it's not necessarily about old fables when people are optimistic. I mean, there are plenty of new optimistic fables.
Well, I'm just saying, you're saying they're more optimistic. People are on Prozac. People are desperately trying to find some sort of happiness and gratification. So these optimists, I don't think there's all that many of them, okay? I mean, if I went and surveyed my neighbors here, there's just a couple of people laugh all day, but most of them don't laugh all day.
But yeah, in terms of people being unhappy, you could also say that then makes the selection pressure for optimistic memes all that more strong. I mean,
selection pressure, again, this isn't about evolution. This is about philosophy. Philosophy isn't evolving. So certainly not within the structure of DNA. We don't breed a philosophy. We acquire a philosophy. We acquire philosophy. And I'm saying right now, if I put up two web pages, a silly religious page and a serious science page, I'm going to get more eyeballs on that science page than the religion page. Religion's dead idea.
Well, I don't know. I guess so earlier you defined religion rather broadly. I guess it depends on what kind of religion that you put up there.
No, I think the only religion survives are in countries where they have no choice, okay, where it's a theocracy.
I don't think so. I mean, there's plenty of New Age stuff, right? And also, again, the optimism that we mentioned earlier.
Well, there's plenty of New Age stuff, but I'm just saying by proportion, I think most of the people who are even gravitate to that are still seeking the truth, and they're just being fooled by carnival artists, okay? They're being fooled by LIGO and fooled by CERN, that they're doing all this fancy new physics, and all these interesting things are happening, and they're just being fooled because they can't understand the details. But I'm saying they are seeking the truth. They're seeking the correct understanding. Yes, they're being fed a bullshit explanation and they can't judge it, so they can't know they're being bullshitted. But I'm saying people are gravitating to the truth. They want the truth. Give me the truth.
Well, I certainly hope so.
Okay. That's a positive note.
All right, let me take care of some closing statements. I want to thank you both sincerely for being here today, for putting up with each other. It really was a true delight for me to finally hear you both converse. Magnus, where can people find you, and is there anything that you wish to plug?
Oh, yeah, so I have a website. It's just my name, magnusvinding.com. And, well, yeah, so I have a book that's already available, called Effective Altruism, How Can We Best Help Others? And then there's a forthcoming book called Suffering Focused Ethics, Defense and Implications.
Okay, wonderful. And Gary, where can people find you?
DoNotGod.com.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you again, both of you, for being here today. And this was great. Thank you again.
Okay.
Okay, well done, guys. Thanks very much. I really appreciate it.
Let's see if my recording made it. See if it survived.
Yeah.